welcome back to On the Fly. Today we're going back to the NHL and we'll be taking a look at who did better in their first month between the Vegas Golden Knights and the Seattle Kraken. So we will start off, of course, with the first part of every expansion draft team, the expansion draft. So we'll start off with Anaheim. So from Seattle they picked Fleury, and from Vegas they picked Quinn Stoner. So I think the winner of this one is probably going to be Seattle here. I think with Fleury, there's a little bit more of a higher ceiling than Stoner, and I think in general that's why Seattle will win this one. Moving on to Arizona, I think Pitlick over Pulkkinen. I think Pitlick will be more of a benefactor in Arizona than, say, Pulkkinen will be in Vegas. And then moving on to Boston, Lauzon and Miller. I think Lauzon is probably the better pick here, although Miller did kind of leave on his own terms. And I am not sure Lauzon will be around that long. I think he will end up being traded back to Boston at some point. We'll just see how long that will take. Moving on to Buffalo, there is Borgen and Carrier, so I think Borgen is the better pick from Buffalo. So overall, Seattle does have the best first four picks, although I'm not entirely sure they did pick the right guys. And I think with the guys available, I think they could have a lot better of a team, although, of course, they decided to go rebuild and not really look for trades. As you can see on the Vegas side, they did do a lot of trades, and they kind of, with Seattle, elected to go more signing route. So we'll kind of see how Seattle wants to move on in the future. Obviously, most of these signings on Vegas's end have kind of come to an end by now. But in general, I think Vegas did do a lot better in terms of contending, and Seattle's looking more to that rebuild side. So we'll go right back into it with the Calgary Flames. Without a doubt, Giordano is definitely the winner here. I don't think anybody disagrees there. If Seattle would have won anybody else but Giordano, I think it would have been an absolute loss for them. But getting a leader like Giordano, especially on a rebuilding team, will be a huge asset for them. Next up is Carolina. So between Geekie and Brickley, I think Geekie is the better player again, especially with the higher ceiling. So overall, obviously these guys are a little bit, in terms of Seattle and Vegas, do look a lot better, but at the time they were kind of having a lot more trade value, and that's kind of what Vegas elected for. And you can also kind of look down here with all the draft picks. So obviously Vegas wanted to go high in terms of their draft picks, and they wanted to pick players high trade value and dish them off for picks. And you could kind of see that in the expansion draft this year, where not a lot of teams were looking to trade stuff, especially before Seattle had picked somebody. So if you look over here, there's a lot of EDCs, which stand for expansion draft considerations. And so obviously there wasn't a lot on this side, and as a matter of fact, there weren't any, mainly because most teams didn't really care who Seattle picked because they knew that they were a rebuilding team, and most of them didn't really care where they went with it. Moving on to the Chicago Blackhawks, I'm going to go Trevor Van Riemsdyk here. I think Quenneville could be a very good case, but I think in the end, Van Riemsdyk was the better pick here. Moving on to Colorado with Donskoy. I think without a doubt Donskoy is the better player than Pickard, so I think Donskoy will be the obvious selection here. Moving on to the Columbus Blue Jackets, safe pick, obviously, with Karlsson. The worst part about it was that Columbus actually traded other guys to the Vegas Golden Knights in exchange to not pick one of their other guys, and instead pick William Karlsson, so shame on them. Moving on to the Dallas Stars, between Eek and Alexiak, I think Alexiak's probably the better player. Although a very good case could have made for Eakin as well, to be honest. And then I think in the end, Alexiak will have more of a better kind of career in Seattle. And for that reason, I think Seattle would win the Dallas pick. Moving on to the Detroit Red Wings between Trolsky and Nosek. I think I'm going to go with the Vegas Golden Knights here. I think Nosek was the better pick. I'm not sure Trolsky will stick around that long in Seattle. Obviously, he's not one of the more top players, and I think, well, he does have room to grow. I think Nosek will be the better pick out of these two. Moving on to the Edmonton Oilers between Adam Larsson and Griffin Reinhart. I think Larsson was the better pick here, and I think that they will get a good guy in Larsson. Obviously, locking him up 4x4, I think it's a good deal for them, and we'll kind of see where they end up wanting to go there. Moving on to the Florida Panthers between Jonathan Marchessault and Chris Driedger. I'm going to call this a draw because I think both these guys are going to be really, really important to both these sides, and especially on that playoff run with Vegas. Marchessault is a big part of it. So I think with Marchessault, it's a good pickup, and I think with Drieger, it's a good pickup. So I'm going to call that a draw for this one. Moving on to the LA Kings, between McDermott and McNabb. For me, I don't think either side is really going to win this. So in the end, I think it'll be another one of these draws, but I'm not sure who really won this one. I'd argue that Vegas maybe would have had the edge, but in the end, I don't think it's going to matter too much. Moving on to Minnesota between Soucy and Haula, I think Soucy is the better pick here. Obviously a lot more ceiling. And then we'll move on to Montreal, same kind of thing, a lot more ceiling with Kale Fleury over Alexei Emelin. So with this, I think Montreal definitely is the winner, or sorry, Seattle rather is the winner out of this one. I'm not sure Emelin did that well with Vegas anyway. So I think Seattle is pretty well a clear-cut winner, especially if Fleury can play well and wants to stay in Seattle. So moving on to the Nashville Predators between James Neal and Calle Jarnkrok. I think, and this is kind of my opinion here, but I think Jarnkrok was a better pick. Obviously, they did have some issues with James Neal, and because of that, I think Jarnkrok's a better pick, although a very good case could be made for Neal at the time. Obviously, he was a pretty solid player, but of course, that remains to be seen. Moving on to the New Jersey Devils between John Merrill and Nathan Bastian. I'm going to go with Merrill here. I think another one of these where a good case could be made for Bastian, but I think Merrill, in the end, will be more important to the Vegas Golden Knights than Bastian will ever be to the Seattle Kraken. Moving on to the New York Islanders, I think this is an obvious one. Jordan Eberle, absolutely, without a doubt, over Berube. I don't think Berube will or ever will be even close to the Eberle level for the Seattle Kraken, and for that, Eberle will be the pick. Moving on to the New York Rangers between Lindbergh and Blackwell, I'm going to go Blackwell, mainly because I'm not sure Lindbergh really will be a big player in Vegas, although I do think Blackwell will play well in Seattle, and I think in the end, they might end up trading away Blackwell, so we'll kind of see how they want to go with there. Moving on to the Ottawa Senators between Mark Methot and Joey Daccord. So I think I'm going to go with Daccord, mainly because I think he has a higher ceiling, especially as a goalie. Not a lot of solid young goalies in a draft like this, so when you can pick one up, never a bad idea. And then finally, or not finally, but moving on to the Philadelphia Flyers, I think Belmar probably is the better pick here with the Tornsky, so we'll kind of see how they want to end up there. On to the Pittsburgh Penguins between Brandon Tanev and Marc-Andre Fleury. I think, although I'm not going to talk too much about Fleury trade again, obviously there's another video to that, but I don't want to talk about it right now because I don't want to get that mad, and because of that, I'm going to say Fleury was the way, way, way better selection over Brandon Tanev, but obviously they did not treat him with the respect that he deserves, and because of that, I think Vegas should get a big X through their logo right now, but I'm not going to do that. Moving on to San Jose Sharks between Schlemko and True. Similar guys. I think True, obviously, right now will be better, mainly because he has potential, where Schlemko kind of fell off. So, moving on to St. Louis between David Perron and Vince Dunn. I think Dunn will be the better player. Once again, another good case could be made for Perron, so I like Dunn better right now, though, especially with the potential that he has. So with that, Seattle will win the St. Louis pick. Moving on to Tampa Bay Lightning, I think Gord, and we'll kind of just keep going here. Obviously, Gord over Garrison and McCann over Lepsic. Not much surprise here. Both these guys are solid players, and they'll do really well in Seattle. Obviously, they will make the starting lineup. So I would like to see how they end up playing there. But as of now, I think without a doubt, this is kind of how it's going to go. Moving on to the Vancouver Canucks, Lind versus Sabisa. I'm going to go with Lind. Once again, it's another one of these picks where we kind of know what happens. So I got to say, with Sabisa, it didn't really turn out in Vegas. So in the end, I think Cole Lind, once again, has a higher ceiling than Sabisa. And I think that's why Seattle will end up winning this. Moving on to the Washington Capitals, I think Nate Schmidt will be the winner, although once again another very good case could be made for Vitek Vanacek, although they did end up trading him back for a second round pick. So once again, none of these kind of things could be made, but in the end I think Schmidt is the better player from Washington. Finally, moving on to the Winnipeg Jets. So between Appleton and Thorberg, I think without a doubt Appleton will be the better pick. Fourth line kind of guy, and because of that, I think over Thorberg, who didn't really play that well for them, I think Appleton will be the big final pick. Moving on to the signings. So between Vegas and Seattle, obviously they had very different strategies. Vegas elected more trade route, where Seattle elected more signing route, signing some big players. Obviously, Grubauer to be one of the names. But in general, I think in the end, Seattle didn't really care too much, and they wanted to try and save their cap for free agency to try and get a really good player and then kind of dish them off at the deadline. That's sort of my prediction as of now, especially because Seattle is in no means of a cap bind, and neither really was Vegas. Vegas was a little bit tighter. Obviously, they were a contending team, but in the end, they ended up just flipping guys off for pretty well picks, and you can kind of see through here with all the first round picks, all the extra second round picks, all the third round, all the fourth round, where really for Seattle they have 3 extra picks than what they started with. So I think in the end it really was kind of a mindset in going into it. So in terms of the signings, I think without a doubt, I think Seattle will definitely win this. Obviously, they were the better team, and I think because of it, I think it makes a lot of sense for Seattle to win the signings. Although for the trades, I think they definitely belongs to the Vegas Golden Knights, mainly because they got a lot out of what they were looking for. And especially with all the expansion draft considerations, I think they definitely ended up winning, getting stuff for free for not picking necessarily who they thought was the best guy at the time, and obviously selecting guys like Carlson, Marchessault, John Merrill, Pierre Bergmar, and then finally Fleury. But in the end, I think it was really good on them to try and look for trades before and kind of get that free kind of picks. But overall, I think the real sort of victor in this will be the Vegas Golden Knights. Obviously, they didn't make it really far, and I do look to see what Seattle wants to do in their future. Mainly just because, you know, Seattle's a team that's young right now. You don't know what they're going to be in, say, 5 years when I'm making this video again, when there's a new expansion team coming in, hopefully Montreal or Quebec. But obviously, that's still remains to be seen. But we will kind of see where they want to go, because obviously they could definitely, Seattle could definitely be the top team. And you never know, this whole row might be entire stars, or they could all be negatives. And most likely, I don't see many of these guys turning out to being a lot, but I think they are better than what I've seen from the Vegas picks. But of course, they didn't want to trade a lot of them, so in general, it ended up being a pretty solid kind of idea in their head. Vegas stuck with their gut, traded a whole bunch of guys. Seattle, on the other hand, stuck to their thing, picked who they wanted, and because of that, we'll see how they're going to be within the next few years. If you made it this far in the video, thanks for watching. If you'd like to drop a like, if you like to consider subscribing, tell your friends about it, leave a comment down with your thoughts on the 2 different teams. Until next time, see ya.